Hello students, we are back again. We are there now on session 3 of unit 1, that is effective communication. In this we will be learning about principles and barriers in communication. So let's see what is effective communication and barrier in communication. So the very first question which comes up is, what exactly is a effective communication? So before getting on to effective communication, we all know that a communication is a two-way process. Two parties are there. One is sender, the other one is receiver. The sender tries to convey a message to the receiver, and if receiver gets the message properly, the receiver responds, gives feedback, and then this cycle of communication completes. And it may go on as the sender may again give some message, the receiver may also give some messages, and this communication may go on. So when this kind of communication goes on, we can say that this communication is a effective communication, because we can see clearly that both the sender and the receiver, they are getting chance to convey their message to each other. And if in the communication both the parties, that is the sender and receiver, are understanding the messages and responding accordingly by giving the feedback, then we can say that the communication is a effective communication. Say for example, you are there with your one of your friend. You are trying to convey a message to him or her through any medium, any communication channel and any communication medium. That very friend understands your messages very clearly and he responds, he gives a feedback, and on the basis of that feedback or the response, you continue the communication. And the other person, means your friend, also conveys a message to you, and then you give response to him or her. So this cycle when goes on, when both the persons, you and your friend, understands each other's messages and you all are responding very clearly and understanding the response, then we can say that it is a effective communication. Both the parties are understanding each other messages and each other response. So we can say, so basically, when we talk about effective communication, there are some things which we need to follow in order to make a communication a effective communication. So the thing which we need to follow in order to make a communication a effective communication, that very thing is termed as principles of effective communication. Means that there are some principles which we need to follow in order to make a communication a effective communication. So let's see what are these principles which makes a communication a effective one. So the very first principle is clarity. So as the term only says clarity, that means the messages which are conveyed during a communication should be very clear. The meaning of the message should be conveyed very easily and very clearly to the other party, means to the sender. If you are a person who is trying to communicate with somebody, you should be very clear with your words and thought. Means with your communication, the receiver, the other person, should understand your message very easily, and he should have a clear idea what you wanted to say or express. So the very first is clarity. The second principle is attention. See, if you want to understand somebody's message, you are supposed to be attentive. You are supposed to pay attention to the message, to the communication process which the other person is trying to communicate with you. Means if you are there in a communication, either you can be a sender or you can be a receiver. So if you are a sender of a message, then what you require to do is you require to make your communication a interesting communication, so that the other person, means the receiver, may take interest in listening and understanding your communication. And if in the same communication you are a receiver, then you are supposed to pay attention to the communication, to the message which the other person is sending to you, and you should pay attention towards the message, and you should understand the message and respond, so that the communication process completes. So attention is must in communication. You are there in a class is running, and you are not paying attention in the class, so you will be not able to understand the messages conveyed by the teacher in the class. So this is how a communication becomes a effective communication, by paying attention in a communication. The next principle is consistency. Here consistency means when the communication process starts on the same topic on which it has been started. Means the topic should be clear, and on that topic itself the communication should move on. The communication should not go on some other topic or some other idea or some other thought. The communication should be consistent on the same topic and on the same thought. The communication should move on as it was planned in the beginning. It should not flicker, or it should not move over to some other topic in between, because this may lead into a communication which will not be interesting and which will not complete properly. So this is the third principle, which is termed as consistency. The next principle is adequacy. So in a communication, the information should be adequate. The information should be complete and in full. Never ever convey incomplete, less, or not relevant information during a communication. Whenever a communication requires to be a effective communication, so in that communication the information should be given in full. The complete information should be given. It should be adequate. Never ever give incomplete or inadequate information during a communication. So this principle makes a communication a effective communication. The next principle is timeliness. Here timeliness means the messages which are conveyed during the communication should be conveyed at the proper time, and the respond, which is the feedback, should also be given at the time of communication. The feedback should not be delayed, as if the feedback is delayed, the communication gets interrupted. So for both the things, means for the sender also and for the receiver also, time is must. For sender, the information should be conveyed at the proper time, on the exact time, and for the receiver also the feedback should be provided and given at the same exact time of communication. it should not be delayed. You may only think that you are having a communication with your friend, you have expressed something to your friend listened to it, understands to it, but he did not responded and moves on. So you will certainly feel that the communication was interrupted and not complete. So this timeliness is also a principle which is important factor which makes a communication a effective communication. The next principle is feedback itself. In order to make a communication a successful communication, a effective communication, there should be a feedback also. This feedback is very must. It completes the cycle of communication and it makes communication goes on again. So feedback is also a principle of effective communication. If you do not get feedback, the communication cycle will stop and the communication will not complete. The last principle which comes up in effective communication is economy. Economy here means that whenever the communication should go on and on, the communication cycle should be complete. For that, it is must that the communication should be cost effective. A medium should be taken, a communication medium should be taken which should be cost effective, which should cost very less. So now as we know that there are some basic principles of effective communication which makes the communication complete. In the same way, we have some 7 C's of effective communication. Some basic terminology is there. All these begins with C. So we term it as 7 C's. So there are 7 terminologies which starts with C. So we have 7 C's of effective communication. These 7 C's of effective communication makes a communication complete. As we all know that in a communication, two persons are required. The first one is the sender of the message and the second person is the receiver of the message. The participation of both the sender and the receiver is compulsory so as to make the communication a successful. And apart from those, these two persons, the sender and the receiver, has to follow either of the 7 C's or all the 7 C's, depends on the situation and the type of medium they are using for communication, to make the communication a effective one and a complete communication. So basically when we discuss about these 7 C's of communication, the very first C is control, then the next C is conversational, the next C is confident, then competent, then calm, clear and concise. So these all are 7 C's of effective communication. So let's see what are these and what they exactly mean in the term of effective communication. So when we see the very first 7 C's of effective communication, that is control. So during a communication, the sender of the message should be in control. He should not be aggressive. He should have control over his language, over his gestures, over his tone and pace through which he is delivering the messages. He should be having a total control over himself so that what he wanted to deliver, that message is only delivered and other things are not communicated. See, as a person loses control in a communication, he tends to speak those things which are not required. So The most important thing is control. The person has to be in control. He has to be control over his gestures so that wrong signals are not being given to the audiences. He has to be polite, he has to be calm, he has to be control over his tone and pitch so that the audiences may listen to him and understands and gets only the meaning which he wanted to tell them. So the basic thing is the person has to be in control. The second C is conversational. See, during a conversation, the conversation becomes successful only when the communication or the conversation is interesting. It is not like a lecture. You only can imagine that you are having a conversation with your friend and your friend is giving information like a lecture, dictating straightforward, and then leaving the place. So if this thing happens, the communication certainly will not be effective and certainly will not complete. So the communication should be conversational. Conversational means two-way. The person should conversate in such a manner so that the other person should also get involved in the conversation and he understands and replies to the conversation, and then the communication goes on and certainly it becomes successful. During conversation the person should not be angry or agitated or in a different mood so that the other person may leave the conversation. So it should be in a format so that the other person, the listener of the communication, should also get the chance to involve in the communication. He should respond, reply, give feedback so that the communication becomes successful. So this is what we termed as conversational. The next C is confident. In a communication, confidence too is required. If the sender of the message is confident enough, he will certainly make the conversation or the communication a successful one. The confidence will only lead to the other person, the receiver of the message, to be able to listen to the conversation and understands to the conversation. If the sender of the message is not confident enough, he do not shows confidence through his voice or through his gestures, certainly the listener will not take interest in listening to the conversation, and at that moment only the conversation will stop and it will not be a successful conversation. So as to make the conversation a successful one, confidence too is required. This confidence certainly makes the listener to understands and to listen to the conversation carefully. The confidence will be shown by the sender through his loud voice, through his strong gestures, and these loud voice, strong gestures, and the confidence of the sender will certainly make interest in the other person to listen and to understand the conversation. So this certainly C will make the communication a effective one. The next C here is competent. Now here competent simply means that the sender has delivered a message, the receiver of the message has responded to the message, and depending on the respond or the feedback given by the receiver, the sender of the message adjusts his tone, his voice, his pitch, his loudness, his confidence, the medium of communication. If he does all these things, certainly he will try to make the communication a more effective one, because through the feedback only he will come to know whether the receiver is able to understand the messages or not, and accordingly he will adjust himself later so that the communication can become more meaningful and complete. So this is what is termed as the next C. It is competent. The next C is calm. If the sender of the message is calm enough, certainly the receiver will also be very calm. So this will make the communication a successful one. You can simply take the example that two persons are there, and one is the shopkeeper, the other one is the person who came to purchase something, and due to some reason the person who came to purchase something became aggressive. Here, if the shopkeeper too becomes aggressive, then certainly that communication will become weird one. So just to make the communication a successful one, there the shopkeeper requires to be calm enough. So if he will be calm enough, the other person will certainly become calm later, and their communication can become successful, and whatever dispute they are having, certainly that dispute may be solved. So this helps in almost all the types of communication. Aggression is not required in any kind of communication. Calmness is required. So when the sender of the message has calmness, he is calm enough to send the message to communicate, the receiver of the message certainly will also be in a calm position. He will be silent, not silent in the term silent means here like he will be calm enough to listen and to respond. So this calm is the next 7C, which will make the communication a successful one. The next is clear. Whatever message you are going to communicate, you should be very clear about the message, that only that particular message is delivered to the receiver, and apart from that the messages should be delivered in such a way so that the other person should not be in a dilemma of guessing the messages. The receiver of the message should not be there in a state to guess the message. He should be very clear what the sender has sent to him, what is the message which he is having. So this responsibility goes to the sender of the message. He should be very clear about the message. The message he delivered should be very clear what he wanted to express to the receiver. That exact message should only be delivered to the receiver. The last C here is concise. Concise here means the message should not be elaborative. Whatever the person wants to express, only that message should be delivered to the receiver. See, when the messages becomes long, the interest in the communication becomes low. When the messages becomes long, certainly it will be distractive also. The other person may not get interest into the communication. So to